Tim Francis here. I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 years now. If you're like me, you've got no time to waste. So let's get down to business. In the next 90 seconds, I'm going to give you 3 of the best time-saving tips and tools I've found when it comes to delegating. At the end of the 90 seconds, you can decide for yourself if it's worth hanging around to see what the rest of this webinar is like. Tip number 1 is Loom. When delegating tasks, it can be incredibly time-consuming to explain what you want done and even more time-consuming to explain how to do it. Loom speeds that up big time. It's incredibly fast to record to your computer desktop and then quickly share the video. Loom is free and installs directly into both Chrome and Gmail. Tip number 2 is do not use email for in-team communication. How distracting is email these days? Our productivity gets instantly hijacked when we open our inboxes and see tons of notifications and emails from customers, partners, even the experts we love to follow. This is why we want to avoid using email to communicate with our contractors, assistants, and teammates. Instead, let's create a distraction-free zone. Now, I have tried Slack before, but I really didn't like it very much. For years now, my team and we've been using Convo, and we all love it. Tip number 3 is LastPass. You may have heard of LastPass before. It allows you to store all of your usernames and passwords in one place. Then, when you visit your most common websites, it automatically logs you in. No more fumbling around with passwords in Evernote or in a text file. What's even better is when you're delegating to other people, LastPass allows you to share your login information without the other person actually being able to see your password, which saves you from having to change your passwords each time that you delegate. Okay, 90 seconds are up. If you're leaving now, thank you so much for checking out this presentation. If you're sticking around, let's get rolling. Over the next 4 minutes, I'm going to outline what's happening in the rest of this webinar. Today, we'll be covering Roadmap to Replace Yourself, the 5 keys to delegating the lower value work so you're free to do the big things and enjoy your business again. For 5 years, I screwed up the 5 keys. I struggled and could not get out of the daily grind. I could see the high value, big picture stuff, but I could never get around to it because I was stuck under all this low level daily minutiae I knew someone else should be doing. Freedom? Yeah, right. My business is more like a prison. I swear I tried it all. I'd read the 4-Hour Workweek. I tried getting a VA from India, from the Philippines, from Pakistan, from Jamaica. I was constantly on Elance, now known as Upwork, VWorker, OnlineJobs.ph, and other overseas job boards. Yet all I got was struggle and disappointment. Then, one day in 2013, I cracked the code. My workload cut back big time. Suddenly, I could focus on the big stuff again, spending most of my work time in my zone of genius. And I could finally breathe again. I started working way less. I cut my 80-hour work weeks down to just 50. I started making way more. My consulting rate exploded from $40 an hour to $1,000 an hour. I actually took not 1, but 2 airplane mode vacations. You know, the week-long vacations where you can turn off your cell phone, no calls, no texts, no emails, just pure relaxation. Best of all, there was no welcome home avalanche of 300 emails and 200 text messages because my assistant had taken care of all of it while I was away. And since cracking the code, I've now had the time and energy to pursue big, thrilling new opportunities. I've become a featured expert on the Forbes website. I've been a guest lecturer in New York City at NYU. And I've even started a second business. Since cracking the code, I've spent an additional 5 years refining my method again and again and again and again. And it's what I'm sharing with you today here in Roadmap to Replace Yourself. All told, it's taken me 10 years, literally a decade, to gain the wisdom I'm sharing with you today. I'm willing to share this with you in the next 90 minutes. At the end of the 90 minutes, I hope you'll make 2 decisions. The first decision I hope you'll make is to take a stand to get your time and your life back. Today is the day you start replacing yourself, no turning back. The second decision is whether you'd like to take a meeting with someone from my team or not. We've got an accelerated path available, and you may want to find out if it's a fit for you. It's okay if you never take that meeting. We don't hunt people down, and we don't use fear or pressure to sell. Whether you meet with my team or not, today's webinar absolutely stands on its own. It's packed with value. It's not just some long drawn-out sales pitch. And, better yet, I've personally done everything I'm teaching you today. No hype-filled, wannabe, theoretical internet garbage. I've got all the war stories and battle scars because I've personally accomplished everything I'm about to teach you. Learning the 5 keys could be the turning point in your entrepreneurial career, helping you to reach new heights you previously only ever dreamed of. The 5 keys are the right attitude, 2, delegate tasks, 3, right onboarding, number 4, the right assistant, and number 5, delegate decisions. Now, if I can give you the exact tools and strategy I personally used to completely replace myself from all the lower level tasks I hated doing so I could work on the big stuff again, would you be willing to set your phone to do not disturb, shut down Facebook, and turn off all other dinging, pinging, and ringing? Thank you. This is my promise. Today, I'll show you how, in under 30 days, you can get at least 5 to 10 hours per week back into your life so you can immediately start getting to what's most important to you. If I can follow through on that promise, are you ready to not only turn off your phone, not only shut down Facebook, but also treat this like a $1,000 seminar, maybe even more, where you're taking notes sitting in the front row? Okay, again, I thank you. My third question for you is, if I can follow through on all of these promises and provide a ton of value for free, would it be okay with you if I took probably about 5 or 10 minutes at the end to let you know how we can continue working together on that accelerated program? Yeah? Okay. Great. So let's get started with an overview of the 5 keys. I want you to be able to see how they all fit together. And after that, we'll get into more detail on each of the individual 5 keys. Now, please allow me to be incredibly transparent with you. The backbone of my entire method is to get a great assistant. Yes, you do need to eliminate, automate, delegate, and batch, like Tim Ferriss made famous in his 2007 book, The 4-Hour Workweek, but that will only take you so far. At some point, you probably need an assistant. Now, even though VAs from India get all the glory in The 4-Hour Workweek, Tim Ferriss himself actually had a VA from Canada named Amy who lived off the west coast of Vancouver. Check out Tim's blog post from 2010 where he mentions Amy. So I'm not talking about just any assistant. My assistant, Sarah, is based in the US. That's her in the picture, right there in the middle. I'm on the right, and her husband, Pete, is on the left. Sarah is a former paralegal and has become the second half of my brain. Contrary to popular belief, a $4 an hour Filipino doing data entry is totally underpowered. They may be able to follow a really strict procedure and repeat the same couple tasks again and again and again and again like an adding machine, but that's not the kind of assistant I'm talking about, the kind of assistant that can help you to truly replace yourself. In short, we need someone who will think, someone who can make decisions on your behalf, someone who thinks like you do, understands your values, and cares more and more about your business with every passing day. You need an operations mini-me, literally someone who, with some training, can run the administration and operation of your business for a week or so while you go off the grid to totally relax and enjoy your first ever airplane mode vacation, so that you can unplug, get some headspace, and write the book you've always wanted to. Do the deep thinking to invent that next big product. Maybe go on the retreat you've always wanted to. Attend the high-level mastermind everyone's talking about. Get back to working out. Pick up your hobbies again. Reconnect with your significant other, friends, and loved ones. Whatever it is that you want to do next, it requires you to be freed up, your time, your energy, your attention. To do the big things in business and in life, you cannot be trapped in your email inbox all day, every day. Now, I get it. You've probably got questions about getting an assistant. Maybe you're even skeptical. You are not alone. Back in the fall of 2015, we did a survey of 149 entrepreneurs and asked them what their number one frustration or challenge was in getting an assistant. Now, I'll admit, I thought there'd be dozens of different frustrations, but I was totally wrong. It turns out there were just 6. No kidding, 98.7% of entrepreneurs had one or many of these big 6 frustrations. I'll show you these big 6, and I'm curious to know if you see yourself in this list too. So number 1 is trust and control. Number 2 is money. How much should I pay an assistant? How do I make them profitable? Number 3 is I don't want to have to take the time to train them. 4 was time to manage an assistant or fix their mistakes. Number 5 is I don't know where to find an assistant. And number 6 is I don't know what to delegate. Now, if you've ever had one, some, or all of these frustrations, we can absolutely help you overcome them all. Use the strategies you learned today in Roadmap to Replace Yourself, and you've got a great chance at getting your time back, your energy back, heck, your life back, so you can get refocused on the big stuff and get ahead. There's no need to waste your life anymore dying death by 1,000 paper cuts. You know, the 5-minute task here, 20-minute task there. There's no need to suffer email inbox hell any longer. There's no need to deal with all the technical ticky-tack stuff. No need to be crushed any longer by admin type stuff. Even if you think it's impossible to delegate what you do, today I'm going to show you a new way to look at your work and unpack it into smaller parts so you can finally break free. It's time to break through, get your time back, and get on the roadmap to replace yourself. So fire up Evernote or pen and paper or however you normally take notes. Let's get started on key number 1, the right attitude. So you know that old expression that says every time we point at someone else, there's 3 fingers pointing right back at us? The same is true in replacing ourselves with an assistant. Yes, the answer is in getting a great assistant. However, the whole process starts with you. Looking back, I'm kind of embarrassed with how silly my outlook was. I guess, though, it was just a necessary step in my evolution. You see, back in 2008, I quit my day job to pursue my passions full-time, to get rich and to get famous. Oh, and to live an epic lifestyle traveling the world. I was so young, inexperienced, and naive. I totally drank the Kool-Aid and fully bought into this loud, over-the-top, successes advertised version of life. Awesome, right? By day, I hustled my ass off trying to get rich with real estate investing. I ended up getting 4 houses with none of my own money, which seemed pretty good at the time. By night, I hustled my ass off trying to get famous as a touring drummer. And yes, that's a real picture of me. Check out that fro. All in all, my band and I played 147 shows around Western Canada. We amassed 3 sponsors, got airplay in 8 markets, and we were even invited to play at the Western Canadian Music Awards. I'll tell you, I was hustling hard, day and night, 7 days a week. It was a ton of work, but you know what? I was on top of the world. But then catastrophe struck. First, my band broke up 20 minutes before we were supposed to hit the stage at that exact same 2008 Western Canadian Music Awards. We still did play the show, but it was one of the most hollow feelings of my life. I'll always remember looking out at the audience. Packed house, industry people there, everything we'd worked for 6 years. And yet none of it mattered. I was crushed. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the great real estate crash hit hard, and I lost $100,000, mostly of other people's money, which I'd have to pay back somehow, some way. Then I was scrambling for cash, you might say, just to make ends meet. So I went to a seminar about getting rich, and I met the speaker. I thought I had found my Messiah. I was so enamored. I even offered to promote him, and I told him that together we'd get rich. He told me if I really wanted to make some serious cash quickly, I should find a way to pay him $20,000 for his highest level training. Even though I was already down $100,000, I still worked hard to raise another $20,000 from investors so I could take this course. I pulled all the cash together and attended the training. Halfway through the course, though, I realized this is one of the most useless trainings I'd ever been to and absolutely not worth the $20,000. Now down to $120,000, and just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I found out that an investment that this same mentor was promoting was actually a $12 million pseudo Ponzi scheme. His business partner was soon convicted in court by the Securities Commission and banned from owning securities or managing investment funds for 20 years. So now it can't get any worse, right? Well, amidst all the fatigue and stress from this perfect storm of loss after loss after loss, on December the 26th, 2010, I developed an illness. A rare case of erythema nodosum, a rare illness which causes extreme swelling and pain throughout the body. I couldn't walk for 3 full months. My business went to zero. My personal finance also went to zero. Had it not been for my mom paying my mortgage for me, I would have lost my house and gone bankrupt. At age 28, I moved back in with my parents to receive full-time care. Day after day after day, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, asking myself, what have I done to create this situation for myself? Thankfully, I'd done a bunch of personal development courses prior to getting sick and had learned a bunch about personal responsibility. So instead of blaming the world and feeling like a victim, I asked myself what my role was in all of this. I had a life-changing realization that I was actually trying to cheat the process of entrepreneurship. I was looking for every shortcut, every hack, every 80-20 of the situation, and I was trying to do it at an unreasonable pace with unreasonable expectations. Instead of respecting the process, becoming a craftsman and learning entrepreneurship every single day, humbly working on my craft, I'd been expecting to be a millionaire before 25, maybe 30 years old at the latest. Hey, some people make it and I applaud them. But for me, it just wasn't meant to be. And that was okay. Life had a unique path, a unique schedule for me. And even though I felt like I was behind, truth was I was right on time. It dawned on me how foolish I'd been to have a lottery mindset. You know, the attitude of if I just hire an assistant, then I'll be set. I had the same lottery thinking in all areas of my business. If I just have one big launch, one amazing product, one amazing campaign, one amazing funnel, then all of my troubles would be solved forever and I could live the dream. Looking back, what an immature rookie way to approach business. I made a new decision. It was now time to graduate from laptop lifestyle to craftsman mindset. Instead of epic, oh my God, I'm going to be so rich by next year, I committed myself to just getting a little bit better with each passing week. I told myself, even if I never get rich or famous, even if I never travel the world, if I could just get a little bit better at the craft of entrepreneurship every single day that goes by, then the process, the journey itself would actually be the reward. Think about it. Why is it that Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson are still passionate about being in the game? Heck, any one of them could have quit anytime they wanted, but yet they don't. Instead, they're deeply passionate about growth, improving themselves and their businesses, and challenging themselves to compete at ever higher levels. Even if I never have and or never want a huge business like they've got, I love the idea of never-ending lifelong growth. Heck, Warren Buffett is 87 years old and still hyper plugged in, kicking ass and razor sharp as ever. This simple yet profound shift in my mindset is the absolute foundation of all of my success today, and the core foundation of today's training, the roadmap to replace yourself. And as I spend more and more time with higher and higher level entrepreneurs, I realize they share the same view. As Warren Buffett famously says, you can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant. You see, some things just take time. And so this is the first mindset shift on the roadmap to replace yourself. is to graduate from lottery mindset to investor mindset. Pro investors focus on steady, continuous investing over time, with greater and greater rewards coming from compound interest, rather than foolishly trying to succeed all at once thanks to some magic pill. Warren Buffett says, if you aren't willing to own a stock for 10 years, don't even think about owning it for 10 minutes. Instead of trying to replace yourself entirely in the next 30 days, think about gaining the skills to methodically replace yourself a little more each week. And I'm telling you, within a few short months, you will be astounded with your progress. If you had to stick with your assistant for 3 years, what would you do differently? I'm guessing you'd probably be a lot more picky about who you hire in the first place. You'd want someone who could grow with you beyond just the next few tasks you have to delegate. You would want to train them. Heck, they're going to be your teammate for years to come, so let's make sure that they're set off on the right foot. You'd probably want to help them along the way. The sooner you help them, the sooner they get it right, the more they can take off your plate. You'd probably want to do weekly meetings with them because you know that your investment in them has literally an unlimited return on investment. Every week that they get better, you get to fly higher and higher and higher in your own business. It goes on and on and on. The second big shift in my thinking came during lunch with one of my mentors. He previously sold one of his businesses for $114 million. Now, this guy was not some flash and dash public speaker. In fact, just the opposite. I knew him almost by luck through my personal connections. After we finished eating one day over lunch, he leaned over and said, "You know what, Tim? All of your greatest successes will come through other people." I swear that sentence has been ringing in my ears ever since. It's so true. It's other people who are our customers and clients who pay us. It's other people who are our suppliers who make our lives easier. It's other people who are our teammates who do work for us so we don't have to do that work. It struck me that I'd probably never achieve my greatest goals, never fulfill my fullest potential if I continued to stomp my feet, cross my arms, and stubbornly insist on being a solopreneur. By no means would I need to build a big, complicated company if I didn't want to, but I'd probably strangle and suffocate my own success if I didn't learn how to find, coach, and lead people. Then it dawned on me like a massive weight. Shit. Until now, I've been a solo operator, a total technician. If I do choose to go ahead and lead others, that means I'm going to have to learn yet another whole new category of skills. So I fully immersed myself in learning how to hire, coach, and lead. To my surprise, within a few months, I'd really hit my stride. Turns out, like most things, the challenge appeared way scarier than it really was. After finding Sarah, who is still my assistant today, 5 years later, I continued honing the process of coaching and leading. I'll admit, at first it seemed like a huge waste of time. Why would I spend 30 minutes teaching her something when I could just do it myself in under 10? And especially if she'd make a few mistakes and I'd end up fixing her things anyways. Well, within a few weeks, Sarah was catching on to enough different tasks that I crossed the official tipping point. This is also known as a break-even point. You see, anytime you get a new teammate, you think you're instantly going to level up your business. This is the fantasy that all entrepreneurs have. The reality, though, is painfully different. Anytime you get a new teammate, whether it's an assistant, a salesperson, heck, anyone, you're actually worse off because of all the onboarding and training you need to do. Stick with it, though, and before you know it, your assistant will hit the break-even point where they save you as much time as they take from you. Stick with coaching and leading them even further, and you'll be delighted that you will, in fact, hit the original expectation that you had. Stick with coaching and leading them even further than that, and you'll be astounded that your assistant will literally surpass some of your wildest expectations. Along the way, you want to be certain you don't get caught in the trough of sorrow. Too many good entrepreneurs and good assistants have broken up simply because of wrong expectations in the first place. It will take a handful of weeks to break even, and you will be required to onboard, train, and lead your new assistant. We cover that more later in today's session. Now, when Sarah and I achieved, then surpassed the break-even point, I was bewildered. How was it possible that I could wake up in the morning and there was work that was already done? How could it be that I was getting compliments from customers for work that I'd never touched? How could it be that I could now spend most of my day on exciting new projects while all this admin and ops stuff like billing and scheduling and customer service was all happening on autopilot? At first, I was actually suspicious of this new reality, but soon my brain caught up. I realized that compound interest was kicking in. Because I made the initial investment of coaching Sarah and was continuing to invest time and energy into her week after week, she was starting to become my operations mini-me, doing all the operational stuff that previously I hated because it was slowing me down. Best of all, she got better and better and soon was doing tasks better and faster than even I could. Some of the things Sarah does for me today are truly astounding. For example, I can send a single message to Sarah asking her to book a trip for me. Not only will she book my flight, picking the perfect departure, aisle, seat, and time, she'll also pick the perfect condo in the right location, style, and size. And when I arrive at that condo, all my favorite groceries are already in the fridge waiting for me. When we first started working together years ago, I never would have dreamed it could be this good. Knowing what I know now, it's actually a lot easier than it sounds. And it's also a lot more rewarding than I ever expected. I've made a ton more money, and frankly, it's been inspiring to see Sarah grow over the years and achieve her personal goals too. Let's talk about key number 2, delegate tasks. To be frank, when I first hired Sarah, I questioned, do I actually have enough work for her to be my assistant? So we started small, with just 5 hours per week. I'd pick a task for her, explain what success looked like, and teach her how to do it once. Then she would run with that task again and again and again and again and again and again. Every week I'd delegate more tasks, spend a little more time training her, and her skills would expand that much more. Looking back, all the training I've put into Sarah is one of the greatest investments I have ever made. Here we are 5 years later, and she's still doing some of the same tasks from 5 years ago, still freeing me up to focus on the big things. Talk about a never-ending return on investment. Before I knew it, I was saving literally 20 to 30 hours per week. Which finally freed me up to go tackle the big profitable stuff in my business. The virtuous cycle was now in full effect. Sarah would learn the $15 an hour stuff I hated doing. Then, once she was working independently, I'd head out and go do $40 an hour work. Every hour like this, I was enjoying a $25 an hour spread between what she was making and what I was making. And my assistant had now officially become a profit center. I went from being hesitant about delegating to being outright pumped about it. I was hungry to find more and more $15 an hour tasks for her to take over so I could be in the $40 an hour work more and more and more. I was tasting freedom and I wanted more. At the same time that I was finding more and more $15 an hour work for Sarah, I was also finding more and more $40 an hour work for myself too. I could finally take advantage of big ideas and opportunities which had been sitting on the back burner for months and years. With my newfound time and newfound money, I reinvested into my business. I started taking higher level courses, which increased the rates I could charge clients. I also started attending higher level events and masterminds, which put me in touch with higher end entrepreneurs who could afford to pay more and also could guide me better. While Sarah continued to do my $15 an hour work, my consulting rates climbed. First to $100 an hour, then to $250 an hour, then $500 an hour, and then $1,000 an hour. It just kept climbing. Talk about leverage. Talk about getting ahead. Not only was I getting my time and energy back, I was also making and keeping a ton more money too. At $1,000 an hour, my $25 an hour spread had skyrocketed to a $900 an hour spread. Every time I found another task to delegate to Sarah, I knew I'd just given myself a $900 gift. Today, it's become a fun game where I'm trying to find as much as possible for Sarah to take over. I know it seems simple in a consulting business like mine because you can compare your consulting rate to what you pay your assistant. But this same magic trick works in any kind of business. In fact, I've personally seen it work for course creators, agency owners, Amazon sellers, insurance salespeople, podcasters, bloggers, copywriters, lawyers, authors, mastermind leaders, and on and on and on. Whether you charge an hourly rate or not, the reality is there's high-level work in your business, and it's best for everyone, including you, your clients, your assistant, everyone, if you stick to doing only the high-level work and have other people take over the lower-level work. In the past, I used to think it was impossible to delegate things like email inbox. I assumed there was just too much sensitive information and too many complicated decisions. I must be the only person who can handle my email inbox. I'll tell you, boy, was I ever wrong. I thought dealing with customers and clients was another area only I could do. As a consultant, they pay me really well, oftentimes $1,000 an hour and more. I assumed they'd want to speak with me personally. Again, that assumption was wrong. What about high-level skills like copywriting, selling, negotiating? Heck, some of these skills have taken me years to develop, so I assumed there was no way an assistant could help me in any way. Again, I was dead wrong. There's so many tasks that surround the high-level skills that I was doing, and that can be delegated. I realize now that by far the two biggest challenges we entrepreneurs have when it comes to replacing ourselves are, number one, unpacking tasks into small enough pieces, and number two is proper delegation, properly handing the task off from us to our assistant. Now, I've got a question for you. Can a surgeon delegate surgery? Well, if you think of surgery as one big task, then you're stuck. And you know what? There's just no way you can delegate any of it. But if you realize that surgery is actually a series of smaller tasks, suddenly delegation becomes possible. Think about it. What are the smaller subtasks which go into surgery? We need to meet with the patient to diagnose their problem. We need to do x-rays for imaging. We need to review those x-rays and make a final diagnosis. We need to contact the patient to book surgery day. We need to coordinate all the other talents, such as nurses, etc. We need to book the surgery room and order all the supplies. What about assembling all surgery tools and supplies? Setting up and sterilizing the surgery room? All forms of prep patient, including pre-surgery protocol like fasting, etc. Final paperwork and legal release. Prepping the patient, getting them into a gown, etc. on the day of surgery. Then there's actually doing the surgery, cleaning up the surgery room, moving the patient to the post-op room, transferring files to their family doctor, arranging prescriptions for recovery, signing prescription orders, doing the 1-week checkup, and a 1-month blood test. Does a surgeon need to do all these tasks? Heck no. In fact, the surgeon does a vast minority of all these tasks. The surgeon has identified just the tasks which are strategy, like assessing symptoms, making a diagnosis, and choosing what the surgery strategy will be. The surgeon also has identified what about his job or her job is a high-level skill. So in this case, that would be performing the surgery itself. The surgeon has also identified what is the high-level access. In this case, it's signing off on final documents and authorizing prescriptions. Then, that's it. The surgeon delegates absolutely everything else. Let's look back at our previous list of surgery tasks. Meet with the patient for final diagnosis, reviewing x-rays, blood work, MRIs, and other imaging, and the post-operation checkup. That is all strategy work. The surgeon should continue doing this work. Signing the final paperwork and performing the surgery itself, then signing prescriptions for the recovery medicine. That's all high-level skill and high-level access work. Again, the surgeon should continue doing this work as well. Then there's this delegation line. Then there's everything else. Anything above the delegation line, the surgeon keeps. Everything else, delegated to everyone else, not the surgeon. Simple as that. Think about it. Everyone really is best off if the surgeon can roll in, do surgery, then leave. That's it. The surgeon is the most highly trained, highly skilled, highly paid person in the room. We do not want the surgeon doing anything but surgery. In fact, we want the surgeon to roll into operating room after operating room, focusing on doing only the things that maximize his or her elite ability. More surgeries get done, more people get helped. Now I've got really good news. The same is true for you in your business. You are the surgeon. I think there's some core skills you cannot delegate. Maybe that's copywriting or selling or negotiating or picking products to sell, etc. And that's fine. You'd be astounded though how many tasks happen surrounding your high-level genius. As a consultant, I've delegated tasks like handling my email inbox, scheduling meetings, invoicing clients and processing payments, prepping meeting notes, monitoring my bank accounts to make sure we're always in a good cash position, coordinating my appearances, coordinating my travel, making sure that I have all client documents in order, handling all billing, and much more. Our client, Allison Perrier, who's both a business coach and a podcaster, so her business is different than mine, has made incredible progress in such a short period of time. In her first 9 months with her assistant, Allison has delegated tasks like her email inbox, scheduling meetings and appointments, monthly financial review to catch past due payments Allison is owed, keeping Allison's CRM, so she uses ConvertKit, whereas my company we use Infusionsoft, to keep that CRM up to date with customer contact information, uploading video recordings to the members only area, and editing handouts and homework for students. For her podcast and blog, Allison has delegated all guest scheduling and management, such as getting guest bios and headshots coordinated, as well as editing episode transcripts, making marketing assets for social media like images, episode announcements, and maintaining moderating comments on Allison's blog. And she's delegating more and more with each passing month. Best of all, she did it all following the method I'm teaching you today, starting with just a few tasks and building her assistant's abilities a little more each week. A third example, and a very different business again, is with our client Tyler Wagley. He's an Amazon seller, and he's made some colossal progress. After initially struggling to get started with his great assistant, one day it all clicked and Tyler started delegating nonstop. In just 1 month, Tyler delegated tasks like customer service, reconciling shipments, calling Seller Central, creating coupons, adding new products to Amazon, and managing lightning deals. Submitting lost inventory disputes to Amazon, his own email inbox, uploading content to listing backend, keyword research, monitoring keyword rank, and so much more. He's now saving dozens of hours per month. Tyler says, "You know what? I never realized how much little stuff was sucking up my time every week. It was just like Tim says, death by 1,000 paper cuts. None of the tasks I've delegated are hard. They're just time consuming. Once I could see all these little tasks I was doing, it wasn't that hard to get them handed off to my assistant. I'm so relieved." Like the surgeon, we need someone else to be teeing things up for you so you can walk in, knock it out of the park, then move on to the next thing. You likely don't have a big enough business yet to have a whole army of people around you like a surgeon does. You'll likely still have to do some of the lower end work from time to time, but that's okay. It's process and it's progress. Even if it takes a handful of months, future you will thank today you for years to come. We just need to identify what can be kept and what should be delegated. The number one trick to doing so is to take the one big task that you want to delegate and break it into smaller subtasks so you can see what you should keep and what you should delegate. We call this process unpacking. Let's take a look at a real-world example, email marketing. The steps are deciding who we're going to send to, when we're sending it, what the angle is, and how we'll monetize or otherwise make this email successful. Then there's writing the email copy itself. Then there's uploading to email software and doing all the formatting like adding links and pics and bolds and italics, etc. Then there's sending a test, trying out all the links. And finally, scheduling the email to go out. Now, we split the tasks into surgeon versus non-surgeon parts. You keep the strategy, in this case, picking the who, when, what, and how of this email. You also keep the high-level skill and access, in this case, writing the email copy itself. Then you draw the delegation line, and everything else should be done by someone else. Now, this may not seem particularly life-changing, but let's think about this another step further. The strategy part here takes around 10 minutes. High-level skill and access, especially writing the email itself, takes around 30 minutes, and everything else takes around 35 minutes. Look, you haven't exactly reinvented the wheel here or landed a space shuttle on Mars, but guess what? You don't need to because you just identified 35 minutes you can get off your plate every time you do this task. And 20 to 30 minutes twice a week adds up to 4 to 5 hours per month. Find a few more tasks like this and you've instantly got your 10 hours per week off your plate. Like we heard Tyler Wagley say earlier, once I could see all the little tasks I was doing, it wasn't that hard to get them handed off to my assistant. So relieved. Now there's a catch. You need to make sure that you start with delegating tasks which repeat again and again. If you're going to spend around an hour finding the task, shooting a video explaining how to do it, then coaching your assistant, then you'd better get a good return on investment, an ROI, as soon as possible. The above example, email marketing, only makes sense if you're doing it 2 to 3 times per week. If it's only once per month, you aren't getting an ROI quickly enough. So pick something else. Maybe for you it's billing or customer service or something like that. The case studies above show tons of possibilities. Whatever you choose, I want you to pick a task where you're going to get an immediate ROI of 2x, 5x, maybe even 10x of your time back. And I'm telling you, keep it simple. Trying to teach a multi-step task with a bunch of if this, then that scenarios is a very bad place to start. It's just too tough to teach, and it's too tough for your assistant to learn. Let's instead get focused on some early wins so you can get your time back and your assistant gets some confidence. In summary, pick tasks which are unpacked, repeating regularly, simple to teach, simple to learn. These tasks can be so simple and straightforward, yet can be a gold mine of getting your time back when you find them and delegate them properly. Once you've got the proper size task chosen, you're ready for the other major area where delegation regularly falls off, and that is handoff. Handoff is that magical moment when you're passing a task on to an assistant. So let's talk about it. Do a good job of delegating or handing off a task to your teammate, and they will cruise, getting things done on hyperdrive, leaving you free to do the big stuff. Do a poor job delegating, and nothing but frustration ensues. You get interrupted 100 times by your assistant asking you questions, and in the end, they've made so many mistakes, now you're just stuck fixing things yourself. Specifically, when you do a bad job explaining and delegating a task, you're doomed to suffer the 3 crippling costs. Number 1 is changeover. This is the ping pong that happens when your assistant has to stop 10 times to ask you for clarification or help, which then causes you to get interrupted 10 times too. The second crippling cost is rework. This is the redoing of tasks when they were done improperly in the first place. Yeah, it's possible your assistant screws it up because they're new or because they're underskilled. But what's even more frustrating is when your assistant does a task perfectly but still has to redo the work because they accidentally built the wrong thing in the first place. The third crippling cost is delay of delivery. As you can imagine, if you suffer a bunch from the first two, changeover and rework, your tasks and projects end up getting done late. This creates a ton of unneeded stress and expense. Instead of regular mail, now you have to use expensive overnight courier. Instead of paying outside contractors their regular fee, guess what? Now you have to pay overtime and rush fees. Instead of getting your promotion or your campaign up this week and making money right away, your promo goes out 2 weeks later and you miss it on 2 weeks of profit. Money and time you'll never, ever, ever get back. I saw these 3 crippling costs killing not only my business, but also killing my clients' profits too. So I invented a tool called 360 Delegation. It's now years later and I still use 360 Delegation all the time. The amount of time, energy, and money and frustration it saves me every month is truly mind-boggling. Simply put, 360 Delegation is a framework for describing what needs to get done. Here's how it works. When you're delegating work to someone else, simply address the 3 parts of 360 Delegation. 1 is vision, 2 is resources, 3 is definition of done. Now here's a few pointers on each. For vision, think, what do you want to get done? What do you want completed? By when? Are there milestones along the way? Can you show a sample of success? When it comes to resources, what are the tools or connections or knowledge? What's required so your assistant can get the job done? Are there usernames and passwords they need? Is there certain training that they'll need, maybe from a manufacturer's website or from YouTube or from Loom? Maybe you shoot a Loom video. Maybe there's other people they'll need to work with, like other teammates and contractors. Is there a certain number of hours that they should be capped at for how long they've got to complete the task? Are there decision-making guidelines they'll need along the way? I'll teach you more about those later in the session, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the resources. Now, what about our third part of 360 delegation, which is called definition of done? What we're looking at here is how will we know we've crossed the finish line on this task? So that could include sign-offs from you, or maybe sign-offs from a client, or maybe both. Are there any specifications we need to work towards? What do we want to do with the finished product? Are we storing it somewhere? The working files, maybe the finished files, or maybe there's something physical that needs to be stored. Are we also maybe going to double check the work? If you say to your assistant, go tackle these tasks, you may always have a little bit of a niggling wondering, especially in the beginning when they're first learning. If you simply add a final step, which is that you get to double check things before they go out, that immediately gives you so much more confidence to hand off so much more to your assistant. Now, ultimately, you want your assistant to be working independently, not needing you to double check everything. In the short term, though, especially in the beginning, you being able to see everything and catch issues and to give them some training on the fly to help them fix what they're doing is all a very, very, very good thing. Here's an example of my team and I using 360 delegation ourselves. This is actually my teammate Peter using 360D to delegate something to me and my other assistant Courtney. So again, the tool that we're using here, the tool we're using to communicate is called Convo. It's like Slack, but in my opinion, it's better. So on the screen, you can see we've got vision and we've got resources. So we can see vision right there and we can see resources right there. Under vision, you can see Peter's describing that Kathy will be interviewing me on Friday, Feb the 9th at 11 Central. That she's requesting to me that my presentation slides are sent to her a few days beforehand so she can review them. I'll create the slide deck and go over it with you to see if you want and or need anything else, he says. He also includes that the actual interview will air on March the 8th. And the topic she wants me to talk about is how to hire an assistant. As far as the resources required, here's Peter's outline to me of what he wants me to talk about. So the total length of the presentation is 20 minutes maximum. The first half minute to a minute is Kathy's introduction of me. So that's right there. Then the next 16 to 17 minutes is my education component that I'm teaching. Then for 1 to 2 minutes, what is my irresistible offer? And then the last half minute to minute are Kathy's thanks and closing remarks. You also see there's a mention of slides to use. So Pete actually went ahead and provided with me with a rough slide deck as a starting point. And Pete also is telling me to make sure that the end call to action on the last slide needs to be to businesssuccess.com/greatassistant so that we can track the business that comes from this particular partner. So it goes on, and definition of done is on this screen. It's just a little bit further down. So hopefully you're seeing how simple, useful, and how powerful 360 delegation is. Now here's a few key points. Delegate tasks you're already doing. Sometimes I see entrepreneurs get an assistant, then immediately fall into the kid in a candy store trap. Just because the entrepreneur now has help, they believe it's the right time to start a new podcast, or heck, a whole second business. Bad idea. Instead of sending your assistant into the wilderness of something new, where neither you nor they know what to do, instead have them take over tasks which are already on your to-do list. You already know those tasks are important, and you already know how to do them successfully. And you already know they need to get done, plus they're sucking up your time and your attention, so you know you'll get an ROI by handing them off. Furthermore, it's really fast and easy to train your assistant on these particular tasks because you already know how to do them. So instead of starting even more projects, which may not get finished, focus your assistant on helping you close loops on the projects you've already started. Secondly, and remember, the first tasks you should delegate should be tasks already happening every week. That way you get an immediate ROI on the time you spend training your assistant up front. If you're going to spend 30 to 60 minutes training them, you'd better be getting double or triple that time back within the next few weeks. Thirdly, choose tasks which are easy for you to teach and easy for your assistant to learn. Easy to teach, easy to learn. It's a simple formula for success. So get these areas right, unpacking in 360 delegation, and you'll be astounded with how smooth and easy your day-to-day becomes. All right. Key number 3 is the right onboarding. In the last step, we talked about delegation, specifically using 360 delegation. Before we delegate, though, we actually need to onboard our assistant first. Most entrepreneurs don't have an onboarding process. Get onboarding right, and your assistant will be up and running in a matter of days. Get onboarding wrong, and your assistant will have to stop 10 times a day to ask you for help, which causes 10 interruptions for you too. What a drag. Weeks after you've hired them, if they're still asking you basic introductory questions, that would be horrible. Feels like the beginner phase is never, ever ending. Now, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The bad news is this, once again, is on us as leaders because we didn't take the time to define our onboarding process for our assistant. It's okay, though. Until now, you didn't know what you didn't know. The good news is setting up an onboarding process is actually pretty easy peasy. It's simple, it's easy to learn, and just takes a few hours to build. Best of all, once you've built it once, you can actually reuse most, maybe all, of your onboarding process for all the future team members you hire. It's a truly awesome ROI. To begin, I'm going to assume you've got a solid assistant. I know we haven't talked about that yet. We will in a few minutes. So play ball with me in the meantime, and let's say you found a solid assistant whom you've done all the necessary criminal record checks, background checks, etc. Onboarding all comes down to something I call the 4 A's and a P. The first A is agreements. The agreements to sign would include like a confidentiality agreement if you're doing that, maybe an agreement on the payment terms you're going to pay. This is really all about the agreements that you need signed to feel comfortable. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you direct advice, but in my business, I have teammates sign a confidentiality agreement and an intellectual property agreement, which states that any IP they create while working in my business immediately becomes my property. I'd love to just give you my copies, but unfortunately, legally, I just can't do it. Every entrepreneur has a different level of comfort and a different style. Do what suits you best. The second A is accounts to create. So I would start with creating the support at email address and then use that support at email address to create all the other accounts. Here are some of the kinds of accounts you might have. Maybe you've got a CRM like Infusionsoft or Salesforce, content like YouTube and WordPress, project management like Asana and Teamwork, communication tools like Slack, Convo, WhatsApp, passwords like LastPass, maybe some PPC ad accounts like Google AdWords or Facebook Ads, maybe some marketing tools like Crazy Egg or Lead Pages, cloud storage like Dropbox or Ignite, and probably also some kind of financial such as QuickBooks or Xero. Now, promise me you won't feel overwhelmed. This is actually way easier than it looks. Even though you might surprise yourself with how many different accounts your assistant will need, you'll find that within an hour or so, you'll have them all taken care of. Best of all, once you've done this once, you never have to do it again. So the next A in the 4 A's and a P is access. We need to give access to our assistant to certain documents like our core values, our decision-making guidelines, vital staff information, and then SOPs or any other kinds of checklists or procedures that we've created. In my Google Drive, I've written out our core values and our DMGs. I've also created a one-page summary of my assistant's crucial info. Her legal address to receive documents, the name of her spouse, her children, her Skype ID, etc., etc. In Google Drive, I've also created a bunch of procedures. Note, you may not have these yet, and that's totally okay. I've been at this for nearly a decade, so it's totally okay if you're just getting this part of your business up to speed. In fact, when it comes to procedures, It's actually your assistant who should be writing most of them. So whatever documents you've got, get those shared with your assistant's support@email account, not your assistant's personal account. Then in the future, as your assistant is creating more and more procedures, those can get added over time. Our fourth and final A is apps to download. So overall, this is pretty simple. Whatever accounts you had to create earlier, just make sure all the related apps get downloaded by your assistant. Recommend your assistant downloads all versions of apps across all their devices, desktop, mobile, and tablet. That way they're ready to help, even if a curveball comes and they're not sitting right next to their computer. Then add to your list the typical communication tools like Skype, or however it is that your team communicates, and your list should be fairly complete. Finally, we've got our 1P, which is payment. What are the payment details between you and your assistant? I'd love to just give you the exact answer of how to handle payment, but alas, I cannot for legal reasons. You'll need to be thoughtful about some important factors. Employee versus contractor. Possibly seek a lawyer or an accountant's position on this. How often will you pay your assistant? Is it monthly? Is it every 2 weeks? Is it something else? How will you pay them? Maybe with PayPal? What is their hourly wage or salary amount? $17 to $20 an hour for this kind of assistant should work just fine. Now here's an awesome tip from the trenches. When I was first hiring assistants, I quickly realized they'd be just as nervous working online as I was about hiring online. As much as they were a mysterious username and headshot to me, the same was actually true in reverse. I was just some online guy. I realized that in many ways, they're actually taking a bigger risk than me. Because I pay my people once per month, not every other week, but only once per month, I'd be getting their time, talent, and energy, possibly for an entire month, and they'd simply be hoping and praying I actually paid them 4 weeks later. So I changed my policy. When someone is new on the team, I'll actually pay them weekly during the first month, and that way the assistant gets proof right away that yes, I am a legitimate business, and yes, they're actually going to get paid. After the first month, then we switch to the normal payment cycle like everyone else on my team. Now let's talk about key number 4, the right assistant. So far, we've talked about picking what to delegate, which is a really big deal. But who you delegate to is an equally crucial step, maybe an even more important step. I'm telling you, at least 50% of the battle is getting the right person as your assistant. Now think about it. You could be perfect at delegating. You could do a great job of training and leading your new assistant. You could even onboard them perfectly, providing them with every tool, account, and asset they need. But if you hire the wrong person to be your assistant, you're toast. It'd be like singing a beautiful song to a deaf person or giving a stunning painting to someone who's blind. If you select someone poorly suited for you and your business, nothing else matters. Now, here's the craziest thing of all. Most business people, including entrepreneurs and corporate people too, are pretty crappy at the science and art of hiring. In fact, in the handful of hiring studies I've looked at, the stick rate of hourly workers is actually less than 50%. Less than 50%. Now, unlike corporate professionals working in a Fortune 500 business, entrepreneurs are required to constantly think about their entire company, forever working both on the business and in the business. Sadly, this means we probably spend less time developing our hiring skills than our business people friends in corporate America, and therefore we likely have a hiring success rate that's actually worse than 50%. I've heard countless stories of entrepreneurs who are great people, and yet they've burnt through 4, 5, sometimes even 6 assistants before finding one who sticks. What a colossal waste of time, energy, and money. So to help you out, here's 10 tips to help you get your very own great assistant. The first tip is to avoid something called cloning. One of the biggest errors I see by far is cloning. Cloning happens when we subconsciously hire someone just like ourselves. It feels effortless. It feels like a great fit because you know what? Hey, they're just like me. Think about it though. We've already got one person running around starting new stuff all the time, has 101 ideas, zigging and zagging nonstop. And that's you. Do we really need another one of those? No. Hell no. We need an administrator and coordinator. We need someone who will do the rinse, wash, and repeat stuff. Someone who will take the mundane, repeated stuff off your plate so you can spend more and more time as the surgeon doing the high-profit, high-skilled tasks while your assistant takes care of everything else. In the beginning, an entrepreneur can get away with doing just sales, marketing, product development, and some amount of fulfillment. The entrepreneur can get away with saying, no thank you. Ops and admin, well, I'll do that later. Let's face it, oftentimes later becomes never. But then enough of the ops and admin stuff starts to pile up, and before you know it, you've got a crisis on your hands, maybe even a nasty letter from the government. So then the entrepreneur swings into action, and after 2 weeks of heart-pounding action, the entrepreneur saves the day, and everyone can just get back to business. Soon enough, though, somewhere around $200,000 in sales and beyond, depending on your industry, of course, you just can't get away with that approach anymore. Ignoring or delaying the ops and admin parts of business becomes a serious problem. Customers start to complain, bigger financial mistakes happen, and whatever, I'll just deal with it tomorrow is no longer an option. At this point, there's a fork in the road, and the entrepreneur can make one of two choices. Option one, do nothing, piss off enough people, and your business consequently will get smaller. The upside is the business is now back in a smaller range of ops and admin that you're willing to handle on your own. The downside is that you're far, far, far from fulfilling the potential of you, your product, your marketing and selling, and you're spending too much time outside of your zone of genius. Your natural, inherent operations and admin ceiling has now become your total business ceiling because you aren't willing to bring in help to do the ops and admin work with you and for you. And yes, I said you aren't willing. This isn't a matter of your business being different or you being a special snowflake and unduplicatable. This is a matter of mindset, of willingness, as we discussed in the attitude section earlier in today's presentation. A lot of entrepreneurship and leadership is actually about us going outside of what we feel like doing. Dishes and laundry are not the funnest things to do, but sooner or later we do them if we want clean stuff. So option two is actually to expand your view of your business and your role in it. Accept that you need help. Learn how to delegate the admin and operations to a trusted operations mini-me. Embrace that coaching, managing, and leading someone else is the gateway to the next level of your business. This is a big part of our previous sections on delegation and onboarding. Now, if this option appeals to you, then the next logical step is to get a great assistant, an operations mini-me, someone you can train to do the rinse, wash, and repeat of your business, which leads me to tip number 2. Find an operations mini-me. When hiring an assistant, focus on finding someone who can become your ops mini-me. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying they can do all the strategy and high-level skill and operations and admin. You are still the surgeon, even in the ops and admin areas. You're still making strategic decisions across the whole business, including marketing and sales and operations, finance, fulfillment, and others. For example, it's up to you to decide strategically if you'll keep your procedures in Google Docs, in Dropbox, or in a documentation software like SuiteProcess. And you are still the one using your high-level skill across the whole business in negotiation and sales and marketing, copywriting, financial analysis, project planning, whatever that might be. Perhaps your ops mini-me, though, can help you to do the surrounding tasks around your high-level skills in research on competitors or pulling up past documents and statements, compiling data and reports so that you are prepared with all the facts and figures you need so you can do your job. They need to prepare the operating room for you and ultimately allow you to still be the surgeon. My assistant Sarah often says she's the second half of my brain. You know what? I think there's a lot of truth to that. I'm the one surgeon. She's the 5 nurses playing all the supporting roles. I figure out what I need and want, then I hand off to her properly using 360 delegation, and she makes it happen. Tip number 3 is to hire using the 3 circles. Getting your own great assistant, or truth be told, any team member for that matter, is heavily dependent on getting 3 areas right. I thank the Colby organization for teaching me the 3 circles. So circle number 1 is the affective part of our brain, our motivation, our goals, our personality. If you've ever heard of Myers-Briggs before, that is an affective test. Also, when we interview someone to be our assistant, that's also usually an affective measure. Circle number 2 is the cognitive part of our brain. That's related to our skills, our ability to read, write, do arithmetic like math, and reasoning as well. So if you've ever heard of an IQ test or an LSAT or an MCAT to get into law school or to become a doctor, those are tests that test your cognition. The third circle, circle number 3, is the conative part of our brain. This is the part of our brain that dictates our instinctive way of solving problems and accomplishing goals. If you've ever heard of the Kolbe Index, that's what the Kolbe Index measures. So the right person to be your great assistant is actually at the center of these 3 circles. They've got the right motivation, goals, personality, and skills and working instinct to be your operations mini-me. Not to be you, we've already got one of those, but to be your operations mini-me. Now, if any one of these 3 circles is missing, we've got a problem. For an example, an assistant could have all the skills in the world, even have a great personality. But you know what? If their life goal is just to find a job for 6 months, they really just aren't a fit. Likewise, they could have all the right goals, all the right motivation, all the great skills. But unfortunately, if they've got the wrong Kolbe score, again, they just won't be a fit. I've had a number of clients say, oh, but we got along so well in the interview, it just felt right. And lo and behold, just a few weeks later, they say, you know what, Tim, I should have listened. The Kolbe score was off, and I ignored it because I thought they were just such a nice person. So remember how I said that more than 50% of all hourly workers quit or get fired, leaving you and I as business owners with the major inconvenience of having to start all over again to find, hire, onboard, and train someone new? I believe a major reason for this is the lack of a solid hiring process. Think about how basic hiring happens most days of the week in everywhere from a fast food chain up to a Fortune 500 business. The boss or the entrepreneur will look at a candidate's resume, interview them once, maybe twice, then make a decision. There's zero testing to see applicants' skills in action. There's zero data or psychometric tests like Kolbe or Myers-Briggs or DISC or anything else to compare applicants against each other, against what we're looking for in the role, and nothing against industry averages. I mean, let's face it, traditional hiring oftentimes is a guess at best. You might say it's classic invest and pray for the best. Now, is that any way to run a business? Oh my goodness. So furthermore, traditional hiring is painfully incomplete. Let's look at our three-circle diagram again. An employee's resume might tell the boss or might tell the entrepreneur about the assistant's skills, which is the cognitive circle. The first and or second interview will tell us about their personality, their goals, and their motivation, which is the affective circle. But where is the part of the process that we take a look at their working instincts in circle 3, right here? With no work tests and no Kolbe index score, we're leaving it all to chance. What a disaster. Let's talk a little bit more about the Kolbe index. I heard about the Kolbe index at a seminar and started researching it online. I did the Kolbe test for myself, and when I got the results back, I was so amazed, I literally flew all the way to Phoenix, Arizona, and became a certified Kolbe consultant myself. If you've never heard of Kolbe before, in the next few minutes, here's a crash course. So first, I'll repeat, Kolbe does not measure if a person is motivated. It does not assess their personality. It's in this circle number 3 conation, and therefore tells us when someone is striving for a goal, what is their instinctive way of working. Kolbe will tell us if someone is more of a planner or if they're more of a make it up on the fly kind of person. Are they more of a let's get all the facts first person, or are they more of a systemizer? Are they more so a strong starter or a strong finisher? A Kolbe test will tell us that. Now here's what a Kolbe test looks like. There's 4 modes, and the 4 modes are fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer. Now there's no inherently bad Kolbe score. There are advantages to being low in any number, just as there are advantages to being high in any number. The question is more about the fit of a person's Kolbe score with the people they're working with, as well as the fit of their Kolbe score to their role on the team. Now, let's look at each mode. Fact Finder is how much information a person seeks and shares when pursuing a goal or solving a problem. High score in Fact Finder wants all the details, the backstory, the context of why we're doing something. This is great when we need detail and precision like working on a contract. Low score in Fact Finder just wants the bottom line, which is really helpful when we need quick decisions and or we're dealing with a challenging, vague situation, such as at the start of a business. Follow through is how much planning, structure, systemization, and organization a person strives for. A high score in follow through wants a plan, they want order, they will instinctively build procedures and checklists, and they'll also be aiming to really close the loops of any projects that got started. A low score is instinctively looking to find shortcuts and cut the fat out of a process, which also can be an advantage if we really need to speed things up. Quick start is how much a person changes direction, improvises, and takes risk. A high score makes it up on the fly, they take risk, and oftentimes they literally need to get into motion to even know what they want. This can be super helpful in the beginning of any business or any product or any campaign. Now, a low score in Quick Start is the great stabilizer. They can be super helpful because they'll tap the brakes and slow things down before we get into action, which can be very powerful in helping to avoid chasing too many shiny objects. Fourth and finally is Implementer. And to me, it's actually the most confusing name of the four. Most people think it means, do you implement your plans? And that is not what implementer means. Instead, implementer means, do you use tools, also known as implements, when solving problems? I was once working with a medical doctor. Because he had a high implementer score, I knew he must be a surgeon, a dentist, or a veterinarian, because all of those forms of medicine use physical tools and are physical forms of medicine. By contrast, had he been a medical doctor with a low implementer score, I would have guessed that he was a psychiatrist or maybe even a family doctor, because those are very conceptual forms of medicine. A psychiatrist or a family doctor will barely touch you during a session. They'll barely use tools. Instead, they'll just verbally interview you, going through the flowchart that's in their brain to diagnose your situation, and then solve your problem by just handing you a piece of paper, which is usually a prescription or a referral. So it's really common for tradespeople like plumbers and electricians to be high implementers, and then internet business owners, Amazon sellers, other sedentary workers like you and I to be low implementers. So now this is the most common entrepreneur Kolbe score we see. Take note of the high quick start in green, which is great for getting a business started and dealing with all the curveballs of owning your own business, as well as the low number in follow through, which is great for dealing with the reality that there's no real blueprint or plan or guaranteed system for being an entrepreneur. And this is the more typical assistant score that we see. Take note of the higher follow through, which means they'll clean up after their entrepreneur. They'll help take tasks across the finish line. They'll create systems and procedure, and they'll help keep their entrepreneur organized. Also note the low quick start score, again in green, which means they'll help stabilize their entrepreneur. They'll be the one to potentially come along and say to the entrepreneur, what are the risks of us doing this? What would be, how would this be upsetting to our current projects and or our partners or our clients? So there's no one right score for entrepreneurs, nor is there any one right score for assistants. That's why getting a certified Kolbe consultant to help you interpret your situation is a really good idea. Now, today's presentation isn't meant to focus exclusively on Kolbe, so I'll wrap it up here by saying that Kolbe is an essential step to hiring any team member. I am so convinced this is true that I've made it non-negotiable and a requirement for everyone who works on my team to have their Kolbe score done. I've actually even gone a step further and also made it non-negotiable that we get a Kolbe score for every single one of our clients too, so we know how to work best with them as well. It just speeds things up so much. It's a total no-brainer. When I look at some of my biggest hiring mistakes, I now realize I could have dodged many bullets had I just paid a few bucks to go through the Kolbe index myself, test any of my prospective assistants, and then also get an analysis from a certified consultant. Okay, let's pick up the pace again and rip through the next tips here a little more quickly. So tip number 4 is to ask a potential assistant what their 3-year plan is. Although a great assistant will start showing you good results within the first 30 to 60 days, so you should see results right in the first 1 to 2 months, the truly highest rewards you'll ever enjoy in your relationship with your assistant once you hire them will only come after you've been together for more than a year. Like any great investment, it's all about compound interest, where the longer that you're in the deal, the greater the rewards become. So make sure you're hiring with the long term in mind. Personally, I will explicitly ask all potential assistants if they plan to stick around for at least 3 years, provided obviously that they have a good experience working on the team, and obviously I understand it's possible that major life curveballs could happen. So I'm not really asking them for an ironclad guarantee. I'm just looking for an insight into their life kind of plans, plus maybe just a verbal commitment. Like nobody's got to write any kind of 3-year commitment down. Ultimately, I just want to confirm that they're serious about being an assistant, that they're not just kind of trying it out for the next 12 months until their kids leave college or something like that. So for the record, I've tried asking about 1-year plans and found that was too short. As soon as I started asking assistants 3 years, it really seemed to kind of cause them to pause and really think about what that looked like. And sometimes I'll even go so far as to say, okay, so your kids are 3 and 6 right now. So when your kids are 6 and 9, 3 years from now, how does life look like? Could you imagine yourself being an assistant, provided that this situation is good for you? Now, if for whatever reason an assistant, or prospective assistant I should say, isn't really enthusiastic about a 3-year time frame, I'd seriously consider moving on to another applicant. Let's face it, it just isn't worth doing all the heavy lifting of hiring, onboarding, and training an assistant to their full potential unless we can expect them to stick around. Tip number 5, expand your pool of candidates. Expand your pool of candidates, and those that you shortlist, be sure to examine them far more deeply. It is truly disturbing how many entrepreneurs will hire the first person recommended to them, or worse, they'll hire their sister-in-law. These days, we'll look at anywhere from 50 to 100 applicants for each new position and seriously consider a shortlist of 5 to 10. Running those 5 to 10 finalists through multiple interviews, work tests, psychometric assessments, the whole 9 yards. I see how my overall hiring success has skyrocketed from an abysmal 20% back in 2008 to an eye-popping 85% in 2018. And it's no surprise I've made such huge strides. I go way deeper and I expand my pool of candidates way, way, way more widely. Tip number 6, pay $17 to $20 an hour. It's the right range for your assistant to be your operations mini-me. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you'll actually save a ton of money compared to paying $4 an hour to the Philippines. Back when I was paying $4 an hour to third world contractors, I found myself perpetually double-checking their work, perpetually getting frustrated with all of their distracted and canceled meetings, all the times that their technology would break down or the electricity would suddenly become turned off for them, and the persistent threat of political or infrastructure breakdown. It was such a nightmare. It's not exactly the peaceful mindset you want when you're trying to think about the next big thing for your company. Now check this out. The entire time I had overseas assistants, many of them for only $4 an hour to $10 an hour. For some strange reason, my consulting rate I charged clients never ever got better. It never went up. Within a few months though of getting Sarah and paying her $15 an hour back in 2013, within a few months my consulting rate went up from $40 an hour to $100 an hour, then to $250, $500, and today it's $1,000 an hour and climbing. So people will often say to me, "Oh, Tim, well, you can afford to get an assistant because you charge $1,000 an hour as a consultant." To which I gently and politely reply, With all due respect, it's actually the exact opposite. It's because I got an assistant back when I was charging only $40 an hour that I was able to progressively raise my rates to being $1,000 an hour today. Tip number 7, avoid overpaying. So I know I just made the case for why $4 an hour is too little to pay, but the pendulum can swing too far the other way too. More and more these days, I'm seeing how common it is to overpay for assistants. I'm astonished when I see VAs charging $40 and up. And I mean VAs individually and also agencies charging $40 an hour and up. Oftentimes, what's really happening is the VA agency is charging you, the entrepreneur, $40 an hour, and then they're turning around and paying the assistant the appropriate amount, which is $20 an hour. So that means that you're paying literally a $20 surcharge on top of the $20 an hour appropriate fee, which is literally a 100% tax. And you're paying that tax on every single hour you hire that assistant for the rest of your entire life hiring them. When you look at hiring someone for 20 hours a month, 20 to 35 hours a month, I mean, if you're overpaying by $20 an hour, very quickly you're overpaying by $2,000 to $3,000 in wages every single month, month after month, year after year. By paying $40 an hour instead of $20 an hour, like literally you can be overpaying by $25,000 to $35,000 a year. That is insanity. Believe me, and I'm telling you this because I've done it. We've hired over 100 assistants and we get rave reviews. You can get the talent that you want in the $17 to $20 an hour range. No doubt about it. Full stop. No negotiation. From time to time, you might spend $50 an hour for a specialist to temporarily help you. Maybe you need an IT person or someone who's really good with a marketing tool like Infusionsoft or ConvertKit or WordPress or whatever it is. But that person is only helping you for a few hours to troubleshoot a situation or do a one-time project on any of the tools that are out there that we use every day in our businesses. But your ongoing everyday assistant, who is your operations mini-me, who's really doing mostly rinse, wash, repeat work, maybe it's on some of those same tools, but once we figured out what we're doing and what the 3 or 4 features are within that tool, the assistant's really just rinse, wash, and repeating. There is no need to spend $40, $50, $100 an hour anymore. In fact, go hire the $50 an hour technical specialist and have them teach your $17 an hour assistant how to do the task. And then for the rest of time that your assistant is doing that task, now you're only paying $17 an hour instead of the $100 an hour to the specialist who's ridiculously overpriced for rinse, wash, repeat work. Now, one other note, I'd also be wary of anyone who calls themselves an OBM or online business manager. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's just a clever title used to charge you way more than you need to pay for essentially virtual assistant services. I've even seen out there that there's OBM certifications. Again, I question those. Who created the certification? Who monitors them? Who enforces them? It's like nearly impossible, right? It'd be like me creating a course for entrepreneurs and then awarding you the title of certified entrepreneur. It's just kind of awkward, wouldn't you say? So tip number 8 is to work with an assistant who has as few clients as possible, possibly even just one client. And hopefully that client is you. Now, there are some IRS taxation considerations, so talk to your accountant, of course. I'll tell you, though, that so much of your speed, ease, and flow comes from working with one assistant for a long time. If they are distracted because they've got too many different clients and or one of their other clients suddenly grows and starts taking up a ton of their time, your work might be neglected, or worse, you might get dropped altogether. And guess what? Then you'd have to start from scratch all over with someone new. What a drag. Tip number 9, avoid an assistant who's building an agency. And by that I mean a VA who's building their clientele so they can hire more assistants to work underneath them. I totally despise this. This assistant's goal, whether they will admit it to you or not, is to remove themselves from the front lines of working on your business. This means necessarily that sooner or later, you will be reassigned to a different VA, one of their sub-VAs, which once again will force you to start all over with the new assistant. And despite their promises that the transition will be seamless, don't worry, it'll all be taken care of. Guess what? It never is. There's guaranteed to be headaches. Again, such a drag. Tip number 10, do not hire overseas. Oh man, did I ever save the best of the tips for last? There's a good chance I'm even going to upset a few people in the next couple minutes. This is the juiciest of all 10, so buckle up. Now, part of the problem is that we entrepreneurs have been brainwashed to believe a $4 an hour overseas assistant could be our operations mini-me. Horse shit. I'm telling you straight up right now that a $4 an hour overseas assistant as your ops mini-me is a total hoax. It does not exist. It does not exist. Back in the day, I wanted it to exist. I kept seeing these so-called success stories of other people using the Philippines for $4 an hour, so I tried it myself. I rapidly discovered the $4 an hour talent was good for only an extremely narrow set of tasks which required zero thinking. For example, photo editing or data entry. Same task over and over and over and over and over again, but no thinking required. This is not the right person to be your right-hand man or woman. The number of horror stories from working with third world contractors is truly breathtaking. I'll share a few with you. My first ever assistant was in India. One day, she completely disappeared. I tried contacting her through email, Skype, even Facebook, nothing. 7 days later, she burst back on the scene with a flurry of emails and messages, apologizing profusely for her absence. Turns out, as she explained, there was political upheaval in her part of India. Because of the corruption there, a politician from a rival neighborhood got mad at her representative and literally had the electricity turned off to her neighborhood. With no electricity and no internet, my assistant couldn't get online. I was stunned. Here I am supposed to trust this person with running a very important part of my business, but she in turn was dependent on the corruption and political shakiness of India. Look, there was absolutely nothing wrong with my VA. She was kind, talented, spoke great English, and she was super committed. But none of that mattered. As much as she wanted to do great work, she would never be more reliable than the shakiness of the world she lived in. Next story. The first 3 Filipino VAs I had were all the nicest people in the world. And best of all, they were only $4 an hour. Unfortunately, they were so painfully polite, they wouldn't tell me when they needed help. Nor would they tell me when they saw better ways of doing things. So all these mistakes and inefficiencies would go on for days and weeks on end, and yet they wouldn't say anything. They'd just say, oh, yes. God bless, sir. Thank you. I got to tell you, it was so frustrating. Even worse, having a focused meeting was nearly impossible. Between clucking chickens in the background, which is a true story, and old 1980s motorcycles ripping by in the background every 5 minutes, also true story, it was nearly impossible to focus and get much done. So I thought, there's got to be a better way. On a couple occasions, I thought I'd get wise and use higher-end Filipino VAs. Pay them not $4 an hour, but $10 an hour, and invest heavily into training them, teaching them exactly how to do their job to perfection. In one case, due to our radically different time zones, projects hit major delays. At 2 p.m. my time, I'd send a task. But that was at 5 a.m. their time. So I wouldn't hear back from them until their 9 a.m., which was actually my 6 p.m. Exercising no work-life balance whatsoever, I'd fire up my email and write them back at 10 p.m. my time, which was actually 1 p.m. their time. They'd work for a few hours while I slept. By the time I woke up and replied, now they're sleeping, and I wouldn't hear back until their 9 a.m., which was actually my 6 p.m. of the next day. First of all, if this mental gymnastics of time zones seems exhausting, it absolutely is. Secondly, if you're keeping score, 4 exchanges between us took nearly 2 full days. 2 full days. What a massive, colossal, gargantuan waste of time. In fact, it would be accurate if you were to call this a fucking waste of time. Since switching to hiring only North American VAs, the same 2-day back and forth, which used to take 2 days with the Philippines, now gets done in 2 hours with fewer mistakes and far, far, far less confusion. That is the speed, ease, and flow that I want. Still not convinced? Okay, check this out. So in the other case where I hired a higher-end Filipino VA, he was having a tough time getting anything done due to rolling brownouts. I mean, literally, just the electricity turns off. It turns off altogether and they can't work. And sometimes they don't even know when it's coming. So it turns out the electricity supply is so shaky in the Philippines that there are literally government brownouts, oftentimes daily, to ration out the electricity throughout the country. I never knew when I could count on things getting done. It drove me crazy. So those are just a few of the stories from my past experience. And I'm just one guy. How many stories do you think there are out there amongst our fellow entrepreneurs? I mean, I could keep going, but I think you get the point. In fact, I've only ever met one person who has successfully used a Filipino VA as their right-hand person. He required them to work through their night so they'd be on the same North American schedule as him, which actually did eliminate a handful of problems and I thought was really smart. But then I asked him how much he paid this assistant and he said $12 an hour. And suddenly I went, okay, well, hold on. That's nearly identical to a US wage. If I'm going to be paying $12 an hour, I might as well hire an American or a Canadian and skip the litany of headaches of hiring overseas. So one day, I'll tell you, it just did hit me. Here I am trying to build a legit business, and yet fundamentally, I'm building it on third world corruption and third world infrastructure. That is insanity. I declared, enough goofing around with the massive inconvenience and frustrations of the third world. I don't care how cheap it is. The truth is, it's sucking up so much of my time, my energy, my attention. It's killing my own productivity, not enhancing it. I took a stand and declared that any future operations mini-me I hired would be, without exception, similar or same time zone, similar or same culture, and same native language, in my case, English. So for Americans and Canadians, that means hiring Americans and Canadians. If you're in Australia, then hire an Aussie or a Kiwi. Whatever allows you to follow these 3 rules. And my operations mini-me must fulfill all 3 of these criteria. 1 or 2 is not good enough. It's got to be all 3. So as a Canadian, it didn't matter if there were great assistants in Mexico or Venezuela or Costa Rica. Those are, after all, the same time zone. Their native language is Spanish, though, and I speak English. No offense to their culture. I mean, it's beautiful and it's fantastic. In a workplace setting, I do not want to have misunderstandings or have to explain basic cultural nuances. I just want to focus on action, on accelerating my business, on getting things done. I do not want to have to fight and struggle anymore to quote unquote make it work. Culture adventures are great for travel and fun, but when it's business time, it is time to produce. As you can see on the roadmap to replace yourself, one of the make it or break it factors is getting a great assistant to be your operations mini-me, and there are a ton of moving parts to find just the right person. The bad news, it can be a ton of work, complication, and distraction to find that right assistant. The good news is that if you get it right, you will be richly rewarded with incredible speed, ease, and flow beyond your wildest dreams. Best of all, at the end of today's presentation, I will share with you how you can dramatically shortcut the process of finding your right assistant. In the meantime, though, let's move on to the 5th and final key of the roadmap to replace yourself, which is delegate decisions. So the fifth key is to delegate not just tasks, but actually decision making. How powerful would it be if your assistant not only took orders, but also made decisions, the correct decisions on your behalf? Imagine they worked independently without you having to babysit them every step along the way. How amazing would that be? I'm telling you, all this is possible when you properly transfer your brain into theirs, teaching them to make decisions like you do. After reading Michael Gerber's The E-Myth over a decade ago, I thought the path to freedom and fortune was to systemize everything, to write procedures, then assign those procedures to teammates who would act like adding machines. And they would just repeat what I told them to do over and over and over again. After getting my first few assistants, I realized there was a major catastrophic flaw in this approach. Sometimes our assistant will face a curveball, an exception, and they need to make a judgment call. But if you haven't taught them or allowed them to think, now they're paralyzed and they have to interrupt you for help every single time. And that is a serious, serious productivity drag for both of you. Keith Cunningham has a great analogy to this. In his fantastic books and courses, he often says, more than just their hands and their feet, I want their heads and their hearts too. If you train all your people to only do, but don't allow them to think, it's like hiring only their hands and feet. You aren't getting their heads and hearts, which are probably their most powerful tools of all. Although I believe the 4-hour workweek suffers from way too much hype and Kool-Aid, there are a handful of good stories and concepts. In one instance, Tim Ferriss describes how he was getting hammered with customer service emails. He thought he solved his problem when he outsourced customer service to a third-party call center. Now they could answer customer emails instead of him. The good news was that the customer emails stopped coming to him. The bad news, though, was now the customer service reps were now emailing Tim with the same damn questions. Do we ship overnight? Do we ship to Canada? Is this product safe for someone with XYZ illness? The questions were endless. First from the customers and then from the reps. So frustrated, Tim had a flash of genius. He emailed his customer service reps with a new policy. He said, quote, keep the customer happy. If it's a problem that takes less than $100 to fix, use your judgment and fix it yourself. Don't ask me for permission. Just do what you think is right and we'll make adjustments along the way. Instantly, 1,000 emails per week turned into just 20. Truly miraculous. Tim goes on to explain. It's amazing how someone's IQ seems to double as soon as you give them responsibility and indicate that you trust them. People are smarter than you think. Give them a chance to prove themselves. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't agree more. Tim Francis and Tim Ferriss are in agreement on this point. All this begs the question though, how do you actually pull this kind of magic trick in your own business? How do we get our assistant to make decisions like we do? How do we get their head and their heart? It all comes down to two tools, core values and decision-making guidelines. Create and use these tools and you'll get more than just your assistant's hands and feet. You'll also capture their head and their heart too. Core values are the heart and decision-making guidelines are the head. Let's start with the core values. In his great book, Scaling Up, Vern Harnish shares an excellent process for coming up with core values. They may sound corporate-y and useless for entrepreneurs like you and I, but I'm telling you, they're actually very useful and they're priceless for any business of any size, including you and I. Figuring out your core values is as simple as writing out a few different stories or situations which in the past have made you really happy, really mad, really sad, maybe really inspired. Anything that's got emotional charge. Now these can be examples from your business or from your personal life. They could even be stories from other people or other businesses or other stories you see in the news, even from a sports team or the arts and entertainment world. So once you've got a few of these stories, a few dozen of these stories written out, see what kinds of buckets they fall into. At most, we want only about 3 or 4 buckets. When I did this exercise, this is what I came up with. And no kidding, these are still our Profit Factory core values today. Number 1, be accountable and transparent. 2, show people you care. 3, pursue mastery and growth. So I put these in a Google Doc. Then I added a 1 or 2 line explanation of what each of them means to me. Finally, underneath that, For each core value, I added a few stories as examples of the core value in action. You'll find the stories are actually the most powerful in teaching your assistant what each core value means to you. So with my core value document completed, I shared it with Sarah, and she immediately got clarity on how to feel the way I do as I work through the day-to-day of our business. She could see my heart. When you create your own, I highly recommend that you keep it to just 3 or 4 core values at most. I have seen some big companies like Zappos be really successful with more than a dozen core values, but I'll tell you, that sure seems to be the exception. For me, I need a short list that's really easy to remember so that when anyone on our team needs to make a decision on the spot, they can quickly run through the core values test without having to open up a document and navigate the situation. I can really thank Sam Carpenter and his book, Work the System, for teaching me about decision-making guidelines, which is our second core tool here. He calls them operating principles, but I use the name decision-making guidelines, or DMGs, because it just fits me better. In short, DMGs, or decision-making guidelines, are the head for how we'd like our assistant to think. They're the rules for each task and or for the business at large that allow for on-the-fly decision-making. Tim Ferriss didn't realize it at the time, but he was using a DMG when he told his customer service reps, if it's less than $100, just fix it yourself, don't ask me for permission. I recommend you do 2 levels of DMGs. The first is company-wide. Whatever is a universal DMG spanning all areas of the business. For example, if there's a conflict or even just the possibility of conflict, whether with a customer or internally with our own team, always pick up the phone. Do not start a fight over email, text message, instant message, or any text-based tool. Set up a call and have a live 2-way conversation. Phone or video is fine. Here's another example of a company-wide DMG. If you're going to bring me a problem or a challenge, I'm okay with that. Just make sure you also bring me at least 2 possible solutions as well. You're the closest one to the problem, and there's a good chance you'll see things that I don't. Now here's the other level of DMG. Number 2 is task-specific. Task-specific DMGs are needed when a specific task requires a judgment call, and many tasks do. So for example, booking flights. I'd like a window seat located as close to the front without paying extra, so I don't want business or first class. If you're stuck and you need to choose between competing options, my hierarchy is 1, I want the economy price. Once that's secured, I want to make sure I get a window seat. That's the second most important thing. And the third is I want to sit as close to the front as possible. So with those 3 simple pieces of information, Sarah is now free to make most booking decisions for most of my flights. She knows how to make a decision if she ever needs to improvise. You can see how teaching your assistant how to think makes a world of difference. It gets really exciting once you train your assistant on how to think on multiple related tasks. One set of DMGs stacks onto the next. For example, if I get booked last minute for a high-paid consulting gig, I can simply tell Sarah, and this is actually a true story, hey Sarah, I'm going to fly to Utah next week for an all-day consulting gig Tuesday. I'd like to fly into Utah on Monday night and back to Austin Tuesday night. Please make the appropriate arrangements. And because Sarah knew all the DMGs related to flying, the DMGs for accommodations, the DMGs for scheduling my calendar, she took care of 2 to 3 hours of booking, scheduling, coordinating almost entirely on her own. And best of all, she picked exactly what I would have had I done it myself. From the seat on the flight to the flight itself to the condo that we rented, she got it, she nailed it. What a huge relief. Not only did it save me time, it also allowed my brain to be free to think about what this particular client needed. That client paid me $15,000 for a day and a half of work, so I want to make sure that I'm bringing my A game all the time. Sarah handling all the logistics frees me up in all the right ways. Thinking. We need an assistant who can think. As usual, our assistant's ability to actually think comes back to our leadership of them. If we don't give them the tools nor the psychological safety to make mistakes from time to time, then they'll just retreat back into their shell and only do exactly as they're told. So here's a few other tips. Catch your assistant doing something right. This totally builds their confidence. Instead of only correcting them when they make errors, go out of your way to find moments when they were successful and acknowledge them for that. So here's an example. Sarah, thank you for doing such a great job on booking my flights and accommodations to Utah. It may seem fairly straightforward to you, but I'm telling you it makes the world of difference to me, which in turn gives our client the best possible experience. So thank you. The ripple effect you have on all of us is significant. Here's another tip. When things go wrong, turn it into a coaching moment. You have a very precious yet fragile opportunity to show your assistant they're safe to make decisions and take sensible, reasonable risks. Instead of ripping their head off, make it a coaching moment. Ask them what happened. Ask them what their thought process was. Ask them why they think it happened. And let them know you'll be glad to help them not only to fix the situation, but you'll also help them gain whatever skills or training they need to avoid this from happening again. Now, obviously, if your assistant is just negligent, does something ultra dumb or outright illegal, you may need to fire them. But I'll tell you what, if you've hired them well in the first place, this probably won't be the case. Next tip, always be coaching to core values. When something notable happens, good or bad, always tie it back to core values. For example, hey Sarah, thanks for getting all my flights properly booked perfectly and then added to Evernote. It definitely makes me feel our core value of show people you care. When you coach to core values, it really brings them to life and reminds your assistant of what's most important to you. This makes it easier and easier for your assistant to make decisions independently, which is important because there will be days you simply aren't available to your assistant. Train your assistant not only on how to do their tasks, which is their hands and feet, but also how to think and feel when making decisions, core values and DMGs, and you'll be astounded with how much they can take off your plate and how much new freedom you'll enjoy. Okay, so let's recap. The 5 keys are as follows. And then after that, we'll do a quick review on what we've talked about so far. Key number 1 is the right attitude. I'd like you to graduate from lottery mindset to long-term investor mindset. Ditch the Superman approach and realize all your greatest successes will come through other people. Move from doing the work to leading the work. Key number 2 is to delegate tasks. Your assistant becomes a profit center as soon as you can find the spread between their wage and what you can make for the same hours. Nearly every task on the planet, even surgery, has parts which can be delegated if we simply unpack them into smaller subtasks. 360 delegation is a magic tool that helps you to avoid tons of wasted time, energy, and frustration. Key number 3 is right onboarding. For this, I taught you about the 4 A's and a P. They are agreements, accounts, access, apps, and payment. Key number 4 is the right assistant. You want an ops mini-me, not just someone who's an adding machine. We want someone who is different than you and can clean up after you. Overseas for $4 an hour is a total hoax. We want someone who is similar, same culture, similar, same time zone, same native language. We also don't want to overpay. $40 an hour and up is absolutely ludicrous for an assistant. So $17 to $20 an hour is a fair wage for a solid assistant in the United States or Canada. Also, use the Colby Index. Expand your pool of applicants. We at Profit Factory and Great Assistant, we look at 50 to 100 applicants for any assistant position. And also test much more deeper on your top candidates. Use extensive work tests, interviews, and assessments to whittle down your candidates and really understand who they are. Key number 5 is to delegate decisions. We want to teach your assistant how to think and make decisions. Your top 3 tools for this are core values, decision-making guidelines, and using notable or coachable moments, even the bad times, to support your assistant so they can gain psychological safety. As Keith Cunningham says, we want more than just their hands and their feet. We want their head and their heart too. So that's the roadmap to replace yourself. I really wish someone had sat me down to explain these 5 keys to me before I went out and screwed them all up for 5 years and lost thousands of my own dollars. I sincerely hope you can see how these 5 keys are a massive shortcut on your own path to success. So I'm curious, how did we do? If you were to sum up this training in 1 or 2 words, please throw it in the chat box. And now looking back on our time together, would you say that this was truly time well spent? Okay, great. So at the start of the webinar, I asked you if I provided you a ton of valuable help for free, if I could share a few minutes about my company, Great Assistant. So what do you think? Did you find this time valuable? Would you like me to share a bit about Great Assistant? Okay. All right, great. So after going through all the pain and suffering to figure out what I've shared with you today, I wanted to share my methods with other entrepreneurs. Originally, I thought I'd create an online course to go into all the specifics. As I was starting to build the course, I showed it to a few dozen entrepreneurs, and the overwhelming response was, Tim, oh my goodness, I love the outcome. I love how you're going to help me get my life back. It's so smart. What you teach is different than what's out there, and it's definitely superior. But you know what, man? Do it for me. I'm already short on time. That's why I need an assistant in the first place. I don't have time to study a course. I want you to do it for me. I hate the idea of having to spend weeks studying your methods, then even more weeks applying your methods, and then waiting even more weeks to actually get my assistant, only to wonder if I actually got it right at all. Tim, I'd way prefer if you would go and do this for me, and I'll just pay you to do it. So you know what? The tribe had spoken. 3 years ago, I started a done-for-you service called Great Assistant. After our first few dozen matches, I went on to hire 3 team members dedicated to just Great Assistant. Since then, we've placed over 100 assistants with entrepreneurs, and we've now grown to a total team of 6 people. We've really dialed in our service. The quality of matches is exceptional, and I'm amazed how fast we can make a match too, often within just a few weeks' time. One thing that's really different about our program is we go beyond just matching entrepreneurs with assistants. We actually provide leadership training to our entrepreneur clients, as well as delegation training to all assistants. After you, the entrepreneur, is matched with your assistant, and once all of this leadership training and delegation training is complete by you and by the assistant, now the assistant's working in your business. And believe it or not, we'll actually still continue to help your assistant to level up their game. We'll train them on advanced topics like taking over their entrepreneur's inbox, Scrum project management, booking your entrepreneur's travel, and how to systemize your entrepreneur's business. The industry success rate is less than 49%, but our success rate at Great Assistant hovers around 85 to 90%. I'm so proud that we're approximately twice as successful as the VA industry average. We've accomplished this by, 1, being really selective about the assistants that we work with, and 2, by also being very selective about the entrepreneurs we allow into our program. When I look at the raw volume of hours our process will save for each of our entrepreneur clients, it's truly breathtaking. If you've never tried to properly hire an assistant before, it is astounding how fast the hours add up. Dozens and dozens and dozens of applications come in. You need to sift and sort through all of them. It is a ton of work. 10 years ago, former Tim Francis would have said, it can't be that tough. But you know what happened? I suffered for 5 straight years. I committed all the hiring sins I've mentioned in today's presentation, not to mention all the leadership mistakes too. I burned through nearly a dozen assistants. And after 5 years in the do-it-yourself wilderness, I pulled my head out of the sand, looked around, and took stock of my situation. Holy smokes, I still didn't have a solid assistant. I was still crushed by $15 an hour work. I was still missing out on big opportunities because I just didn't have any time to pursue them. In short, I finally humbled myself. I admitted to myself, hiring really is quite tough. In fact, it is really tough. And that day is when I became a craftsman in hiring. I got my head straight, decided it was time to stop jerking around, and it's time to hire someone from the US or Canada. I got to work on being a better leader. Soon after, I found Sarah. Then within just a few months, everything changed. Since that turning point 5 years ago, I'm astonished with how much our method has elevated and refined. In fact, these days it would be virtually impossible for the old do-it-yourself Tim to compete with the new Tim's hiring machine that is Great Assistant. We've developed advanced proprietary methods. We use large pools of data to assess candidates. We're often comparing applicants against benchmarks spanning tens of thousands of other assistants around the world. And you know what? It makes a ton of sense for us to do it because we do this professionally. You know what? It's like building a house. Anyone with enough time on their hands could watch enough YouTube videos to learn how to build a house themselves, how to do the plumbing, how to do some of the electrical. In fact, I know 2 couples in Canada who've actually done it. They built their entire house themselves. It took them 2 to 3 years, but they did get it done. Now, alternatively, if you want to build a house, you can hire pros. You can hire pros who've got pro tools and professional skills and professional processes, years of professional experience, and a wide network of connections to draw from to make things happen quickly. And you know what? If you hired a professional house builder, they would get your whole house built, not in 2 to 3 years, but in 2 to 3 months. That means you'd get to move in far sooner, you get to move on with your life far sooner, plus you've got the peace of mind knowing that it was done right. So to help you determine if our service is even worth exploring any further, I've put together a quick 5-minute quiz for you. So grab that pen and paper or Evernote or whatever. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You'll give yourself a score on each, and then you'll add up your score at the end. Based on how you score, I can give you a recommendation on whether you should book a meeting with us or not. Let me know when you're ready. When you've got your pen on hand, simply put a yes in the chat box. All right, here we go. So question number 1, what are your annual top line sales? If it's under $100,000, give yourself 5 points. If it's $100,000 to $250,000, give yourself 10 points. And if it's $250,000 and up, give yourself 20 points. Question number 2. Are there big ideas and opportunities stuck on the back burner because you're crushed under mundane, repetitive work? No? Give yourself 0 points. I think so. Give yourself 5 points. Absolutely yes. Give yourself 10 points. Question number 3. Are you missing out on important personal activities such as family, friends, travel, working out, and hobbies? No? Give yourself 0 points. Maybe? Give yourself 5 points. Absolutely yes. Give yourself 10 points. Question number 4. Over the first 4 weeks of having your new assistant, how much time are you willing to block off to onboard, train, and coach your new assistant? Less than 5 hours a week? Give yourself 0 points. 5 to 10 hours a week? Give yourself 10 points. Whatever it takes, Tim, give yourself 20 points. Question number 5. When someone is your operations mini-me, they're taking huge amounts of work and stress off your plate, so they do need to stay in sync with you. Are you willing to meet with your assistant virtually for at least 45 minutes every week so they can stay plugged into you and your goals? No. Seems like a waste of time to meet that much. Give yourself 0 points. Sure. Seems like a lot of meeting, but I'll give it a shot. Give yourself 5 points. Absolutely yes, I'll absolutely make it happen. Give yourself 10 points. Okay, now let's add up your score. Please put your total in the chat box. All right. Okay, great. So let's find out what your score means. 55 or more. You probably needed an assistant 6 months ago. Let's find out as soon as humanly possible if we are a fit to work together or not. Wait no longer. Book a meeting with us immediately. Go straight to greatassistant.com/apply and pick the earliest available slot. You will thank me. Check out the booking link in the chat box now. All right, what if you scored 35 to 54 points? Most signs point to the fact that an assistant would be helpful to you, although it's not fully clear. Go ahead and book a meeting now. We're still happy to speak with you. We'll just need to discuss the lower parts of your score before we can accept you into our program. So again, book your meeting at greatassistant.com/apply. What about if you scored 0 to 34 points? Now, although an assistant might be able to help a bit and could be a nice luxury, it probably just isn't worth the time, energy, and expense at this time. It's probably just too early. Instead of getting an assistant, focus your time, energy, and money on improving your sales and marketing. You'll probably get a bigger boost by putting your time, energy, and money there. If you like, come back to this quiz in 3 months from now and take it again. Who knows, maybe in a few months you'll be better suited for our program. If you feel you're already strong in sales and marketing and yet still scored in this lowest tier, take a few minutes to reflect on what kind of business you want. It could be that you're best off as a solopreneur business, a kind of business that's simple enough that you can manage it all by yourself without having to do meetings and all the rest. Or perhaps your business already fits your lifestyle and your life goals really nicely. If you scored high enough to book a meeting and you choose to book a meeting with us, here's what to expect. First of all, it's a 45-minute meeting. Secondly, it's meant to be interactive. Naturally, you'll have a bunch of questions. You'll probably have questions about what's the investment, about the timeline, and if it's the right time for you to get an assistant or not. We're going to have some questions for you too. And at any time during that meeting, if either of us, you or us, feels that this just isn't a fit, we'll just end the meeting early. Just that simple. Either way, by the end of the meeting, you'll have a clear sense of if our program is worth further exploring or not. Now, please note, our program is not for everyone. It does require a financial investment. It also requires a time commitment for you to get started. And we only serve entrepreneurs based in the United States and Canada. Now, also remember, we also only place virtual assistants, no on-location help. Although we can't guarantee your assistant will be in your city, your state, or your province, we absolutely do guarantee they'll be in the United States or Canada, nothing overseas. Once again, here's the link to book your session now, greatassistant.com/apply. Whether you choose to book the meeting or not, thank you for studying with me today. I hope the roadmap to replace yourself, the 5 keys to delegating the lower value work so you're free to do the big things and enjoy your business again, has been illuminating and will help you to avoid making the same extremely expensive mistakes I did. I take the privilege of teaching very seriously, so I sincerely thank you for allowing me to be a part of your success story. Thank you so much. This is Tim Francis.